we really understand.
Yes.
And we also learn, can you hear me? We also learn
Yes.
that our life lasts only as long as there are conditions to support this present life, and then moment of death, and then another life starts, because the consciousness doesn't suddenly cease. There are conditions for it to continue. But as we all know, conventionally, lifespan is limited, and there's no way of knowing when the end is going to come. It can come anytime for any of us.
Like you mentioned in your message to me that Roti had explained to you, actually what we cling to is nothing. We think there was a Roti that was alive, like we think there is a Sarah or Jonathan, but actually it's clinging to thin air, because actually they're just moments of seeing and hearing and thinking, pleasant feeling, unpleasant feeling. So the one that we knew as our very dear friend, actually nothing at all, like the wind passing through, and like you say, a very peaceful passing away and new life, everything forgotten of this life, new family, new birth, new experiences. And life is like this from moment to moment, nothing left at all from moment to moment.
This will take a long time to really understand what life is, that it is only a moment, and that there is no Roti, no Nina at this moment, so only passing moments. This is difficult. In theory, we can understand, but to really understand it, that takes a long time.
So do you mean, is it a question of practice, or is it just a question of understanding? Practice, I mean, as in awareness.
Yes.
The word practice is really not so clear. It seems like a self who is practicing, but there is no self. So we have a lot of misunderstandings with the word practice. It's
understanding is not something that can be practiced. Understanding comes by understanding. Awareness and understanding are both moments of consciousness of a particular kind, and they also arise by conditions. So the idea of practicing to have them is actually not, as we understand it, compatible with the Buddha's teaching as a whole. But there are factors which will contribute to the development of understanding, most notably hearing and considering the Buddha's teaching, his description of the reality of the present moment, because that was what enlightenment meant for him. He came to penetrate, to see in a very real sense what is the reality of the present moment, as opposed to what we take it to be. And so by considering the way he explains things, that can be a condition for the development of that understanding and awareness.
I just introduce you to Ajahn. Are you here, Ajahn?
Yes, I'm here. Sawadee ka.
Sawadee ka, Ajahn. I think, Ajahn, you probably have received my message and the details about Roti's passing away, and anyone who has just joined. Roti passed away a few days ago, I think a week ago. And Milena has joined us for the first time today. Milena is a friend of Roti's from Mexico, who has known him since she was a teenager. So this is her first time joining us today. She's not familiar with the Pali terms, but Roti has talked to her quite a lot about the Dhamma and about us. So he would be so glad to know that she has joined the discussion.
Nice to meet you. And hearing about Roti passing away, has passed away. it's our sad moment, but it might be pleasant moment for the next life of what we take for Roti, right? Different
Yeah.
moment. One can condition happy moment and the other can condition sad moment. So sad for us, but might be happy for Roti in his next life. And those who are around him, the newly born, someone.
Yes, and he also brought so much joy to me too as a person. So there's so much happiness in me for having had that experience with him, as a friend.
Might be happier life than this life. Who knows? More pleasant.
For us, I think, yes, I think for us, many happy or joyous moments, because the last few years he got such joy and appreciation of the Dhamma and what we think of as the true Dhamma. He realized no need to live in a temple or to meditate or follow a practice, but he understood more and more about the truth of life now, letting go of the big burden of the idea of I that has to do something. And also he was so glad to share his understanding with friends like yourself and translate passages into Spanish and this kind of thing. So I rejoice that he was able to join us for so many Dhamma discussions. He came with us to Hong Kong and Taiwan and Vietnam, and so many discussions in Bangkok with Ajahn. So we feel very glad that he had these opportunities and he could share and had let go of all the wrong ideas and practices from before. So I think we can be very glad for someone who has found such peace in understanding the truth about life.
Yeah, this is what I'm so grateful for you guys giving him this and the teachings, and that he really, I felt in the last years, there was some sort of other type of understanding that was so much more profound than before, all of a sudden. And there was, my experience was just through him, but there was always this sort of awareness of every moment or every second that was happening, and getting through things and being very truthful about not even anything that I could really explain, because there wasn't much feeling involved. It was just a real presence. And I know that his teacher here in this Zoom was such an inspiration to him. And he kept telling me, look at, he had shown me pictures of Sarah and John, both of you saying, look at how beautiful these people are. Like, it's amazing that there's just so much beauty, and I just felt like he felt so much love here. It was an incredible space for him. And it's sort of almost perfect in its own, it is just perfect that he lied down and then died, like that was it. And then, the door opens and somebody else comes in and whatever happens, but that was it,
I think he was a very serious meditator for many years. And in fact, he seemed to be the owner perhaps of a meditation center in Thailand somewhere. He's still up there on the internet. I was looking at it earlier, and I don't know what the situation is there, but just to, in the light of what you've said, that for someone who has followed a practice like that and then comes to understand that in fact was not what the Buddha's teaching is all about, that the true understanding comes not from striving to have it in that sense, but from considering the truth of what he spoke about.
Yes.
And just by reflecting on that, not in a a ritualistic sort of way at all, but because of the interest in seeing the value in the Buddha's teaching and reflecting on it, and naturally, occasionally from time to time, to appreciate that that is the way understanding develops is, as Sarah said a minute ago, I think a great release. And it's no surprise to us that, you know, he felt so comfortable having come to that understanding and appreciating things in that way. And we all owe a similar debt of gratitude to Ajahn Suchin, because it's due thanks to her that we all understand the teachings in the way that we believe they were originally intended.
And he visited Ajahn when Ajahn was in hospital. And the first time he said they were not so keen that he would talk to her or meet her, but he insisted. And then he spoke with her every day, and that helped him such a lot.
Yeah, this was quite amazing that Roti met Ajahn Suchin when she was in hospital, quite seriously ill or recovering from a serious illness. And he was able to have like one-on-one conversation with her daily, mostly in Thai, I think. And then there was a group from India who came over to visit Ajahn, also in hospital, and there was a series of talks there that he attended. And then Sarah and I came to Bangkok to visit Ajahn, also in hospital, and that's where we first met Roti, actually, in hospital.
Oh, yeah.
But it was quite amazing coincidence that he had this incredible opportunity. And then, as Sarah said, he came with us to Vietnam, to Taiwan, to Hong Kong, where we were living at the time. And we spent a lot of time together, traveled together, lots of chats, and got to know each other really well. And he's, as you know, he's a very amazing, interesting personality and fun to be with, and pleasant, courteous, and knowledgeable, and got just such a great sense of humor. One of which is his name, Rot. In case you weren't aware, in Thailand, he's only known as Roti, as in the Indian bread. I don't know where the name came from, but obviously he part of his sense of humor. He always liked being called Roti. No one ever called him Rodrigo or anything like that. So that's how he's known in Thailand. And many people know him.
And he was so helpful always. And then he had a car and to transport us, to help us, and very helpful person.
Yes, extremely generous and very good-hearted, but the sense of humor is really the top contender there, you know. It's just so funny.
And Milena, more than just coincidence that he was at the hospital listening to Ajahn and the people from India came at that same time, he even decided to sponsor their stay, and got a room for them and drove them around in his car. And later on, when they returned to India, he even bought a set of the Tipitaka for them. So it was not just by coincidence he was there and they were there, but he was doing a lot. And you could say that he's one. Without him, maybe what followed in India would not have been the way it is today.
Wow. That's incredible. He was so
very generous, very kind. Yes.
Yeah, he looked for ways to help, to contribute. I enjoyed that.
Well, it's so great that he's had this, that he had you guys in his life, you know, and he really, you know, he in I guess anywhere in the world, people are not really willing to, they're not interested in knowing anything more than what to buy, really, you know. And it's very difficult to be able to listen, you know, to even give yourself the opportunity to listen and to learn something. And he would speak of his ideas as his own. And if you were maybe savvy enough to catch on to it as something that clicked in your brain, he would really try to explain this knowledge to you as a friend with me always, but I could see it happening around, and how it was just so matter of fact, and emotionally there was not any sort of intention behind it. It was just information, as in sentences. And that was really a beautiful thing that came. It was just like as if he was driving, you know, somebody in a car and taking you somewhere. It was literally just an experience like that, with no drama, with no, you know, intention behind it. And that was something that I think he really got from this, I guess, this understanding of truth, you know. Because I remember one time he told me that the problem was his intention. Like, as you said before, John, when he was meditating or he was searching for something, it was about, he had to realize that he had to stop searching, basically, or that he had to stop trying. I mean, that's a very difficult, for me, that's a very difficult thing to try to understand. It's a difficult thing to understand, because you think that you're supposed to constantly be rewarded or to receive things, you know. That's what you're sort of conditioned to think as your existence is based on. So he was there, you know, he was right there. Like, it was, I mean, of course, this is something that I imagine is for as long as you live, and that's as long as he lived.
Your
Yes,
own
he was.
experience, then? What is your own understanding from what Roti taught you?
Mine was, at first I was thinking of it a lot like physics. My first intention to understanding was thinking that it was about physics. So that maybe it was about light coming through your eyes. I mean, this is very sort of, it's going to sound like a little child, but this is the way that I had imagined it. Like an awareness instead of creating substance in what you see, experiencing the phenomenal experience of light through eyes. So actually, like, just the physical aspect of hearing and seeing. And then I realized I was wrong, and that it was that what's there isn't there, because it disappears, and that you're constructing it in your imagination. So there's a glass of water, and you think, when you see it, your brain tells you that all the information that constructs that glass of water. But then if you were to close your eyes, it's not there. So it's not there.
I think you hit the nail on the head earlier when you said that he explained that one has to stop trying to find something, or trying to see reality, for that matter. Because as we were saying earlier, understanding is conditioned too, like all other realities. Seeing is conditioned. This moment of seeing is conditioned. It's conditioned by consciousness that experiences the visible object, and then the thinking about visible object that that thinking processes the visible object in terms of people and things, whereas the moment of seeing is just the bare experiencing of visible data, just like the moment of hearing is the experiencing of just sound. The moment of experiencing sound, there's no words, there's no understanding of the meaning of the words being spoken. That comes about by moments of thinking that follow quickly after the experiencing of the sound and so forth. And so it's not a question of trying to see these things, but reflecting on the possibility of that being the way things are, and considering whether that description of the present moment is consistent with life as we know it. So once one appreciates that it's not about trying to have awareness and understanding, but it's about that awareness and understanding develop naturally by the right conditions. That, I think, is what we may have been trying to convey to.
And the main point is that life just exists in a moment, like now. So we can ask, what is true or what is real now? What is experienced at this very moment? Because what happened yesterday, what happened a moment ago, Roti as we knew him, all gone. And what hasn't come, hasn't come. So life is just at this moment. So we learn to understand what is real now, as opposed to what is the fantasy, the ideas that, like you mentioned, about different objects that are seen, or different ideas about what's heard, different people, different dreams, and so on. So what do you understand to be true or real at this moment?
At this moment, I feel, well, I guess my legs are a bit hot. So there's that. I feel heat, a lot of heat.
Okay, so just to pause there. So at the moment, there's touching. So heat is experienced. We think my legs are hot, but actually it's just heat that is experienced through the body sense, and then thinking about, oh, my legs are a bit hot. So heat is real. It's
Right.
what is experienced at this moment, but my legs are hot. It's just the object of thinking, the ideas, the concepts, the stories. So we learn to distinguish between what is real, the heat that is experienced, and the idea about my legs taking the heat for something such as my legs. So heat is real, and what experiences the heat?
What experience is the heat?
What experiences the heat? The heat is experienced, so what experiences the heat now?
Oh, I see. What is-
Because the body itself can't experience, can it? It's just skin and bones and blood and so forth.
Oh, I see. So what experience is the heat?
Sorry, what experiences the heat? So
Oh,
how can he? Yeah. So just the sound is experienced by the consciousness that arises at the ear, for example. So what experiences heat?
well,
Sound is conditioned, really, the hearing of is sound, and also the ear sense, and that is a part of the body. Very short moment, it's there, and then it goes. Everything, all the conditions, they come together for these experiences, and they are gone immediately. So it's not easy to understand the reality at this moment.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. So what experiences the heat? It would be a cellular experience. You know, this is, my mind goes into the science of things. Or
So,
it could be, not sure.
so what we're getting at is that there are two kinds of realities. Those realities that cannot experience anything, like the heat or the sound or what is visible, what is seen. Heat doesn't know anything. It doesn't experience anything. It's just a reality that is experienced at this moment. The sound doesn't experience anything. It's just the reality that is experienced. But we're so used to thinking there is an I that experiences. We think I experience heat at this moment, or I experience the sound that is heard. Whereas in fact, in truth, there are just moments of experiencing. Hearing is a moment of experiencing, which hears the sound and then falls away. Touching, or body consciousness, we can call it, is a moment of experiencing heat and then falls away. So there are just the realities that cannot experience anything, and there are the realities that experience, such as the hearing or the seeing or the touching or the thinking. And as soon as we start talking about my legs are hot or the cellular experience, these are ideas different from the realities that can be understood just a little bit even now. So at the moment of touching, heat is real, it's experienced and it's gone, but cellular experience can only be thought about. So we are distinguishing between the truth about the reality at this moment, as opposed to the idea, the story we have about it. And the reason we learn more about the realities now, such as heat, which is experienced, is to understand, like you mentioned in your message to me, that in truth, there is nothing there, no one there. In truth, there is no leg, there is no body, there is no person. It's just heat that is experienced for a moment and then gone. At another moment, it's cold or hardness. Different realities that are experienced, each one gone, and different kinds of realities which experience, such as the touching or the seeing. No one that experiences, nothing that experiences, just different realities arising and falling away. And this is life from moment to moment, different moments of experiencing. So in this sense, there is birth and death at each moment, because each moment of experience has gone, never to return. And from birth to death, it's like this, different moments of experiencing, different objects that are experienced. And at the end of life, just another moment of experiencing. So life goes on, lifetime after lifetime, like this. So what Roti was pointing to when he talked about nothing is how there are just these different phenomena, these different realities, or dhammas, as we call them, arising and falling away, gone. Each one, nothing, as soon as it's gone, never to arise again. No one there, no thing there. And so life just exists in this moment. So it's very deep and very subtle. and we discuss more and more about the truth about these realities, to really appreciate that in truth there is no one, no thing at all. Does this make some sense to you, Milena?
It does very much, but it's it makes sense to me because it's almost like I can feel it. I can feel what you're saying more than understand.
Yes, it's not easy to grasp even intellectually, but just to put it in general terms, some of what Sarah was saying. Conventionally, we think that the eye sees and the ear hears, but the experiencing of what is visible and the hearing of sound is a mental function, not just a physical process, because that's what distinguishes the sentient being from the non-sentient being experiencing. And experiencing, as I just said, is a mental process, a mental factor. So when we talk about any kind of experiencing, it has to be mental rather than physical, not to say that it's wholly independent of physical things, because obviously sound has to impinge on the ear in order for it to be heard. But we learn that there are these two different kinds of reality, as Sarah explained, the experiencing and the things that do not experience, but can only be the object of experience. And the reason we learn about them is that our whole conception of the world is based on a lot of assumptions that may not be in accordance with the way things are in truth and reality. And coming to have a better understanding of how things actually are, rather than how we just assume them to be, is the basis for a better understanding, the understanding that leads to, that is the development of the path taught by the Buddha. I'm sure Ajahn will want to add something at this point also. Ajahn?
Yes. Just talk about this moment. What is the ultimate truth of this very moment? They see it, everyone knows, but what is it? How come to be that moment of seeing? That's why it's the absolute truth that no one makes it arise, no one can do anything, but it's there already, no matter what we are talking about. It's conditioned to be such and such differently by different conditions. Is it true? Just talking about any moment in life, it's there by conditions already. For example, there's seeing now, is there already. There's hearing, is there already. If it doesn't arise, there cannot be seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching. But no understanding of the moment when it's there and the moment when it's gone, because nothing is permanent. Seeing is always there. At moment of hearing, there's no seeing. At moment of thinking, there's no sound at all appearing. This is life. Who knows what conditions it? Ignorance, not understand the truth. As it's not true, it has its truth to be known as it is. But no one has thought about it at all. Just thought. Just think about what is there, people and things, what is the situation all the time, from morning to evening. But what is there in each moment? Is it permanent, the moment of waking up and the moment of falling asleep? It has to be like this, who knows? Keep on. As long as there are conditions for whatever arises, it has to arise, because conditions, condition it arising, right now, condition seeing to arise at moment of what is there can impinge on the eye base, and without the eye base, how can there be seeing? But what is the absolute truth? The ultimate truth of what is there now? It's gone, never to arise again. Just consider the truth of each reality right now to understand the truth of life of each moment that can be known exactly, but it cannot be taken for any permanent thing at all. No one at all. What is seen cannot be anyone at all. It's only that which can impinge on the ideas, conditioned moment of seeing, arising, and see. That's all. Seeing cannot think, seeing cannot like, seeing cannot do anything at all. It's conditioned just to arise, to experience what is there now, and then gone. Is this true? As there is birth and death, and the arising of what is there in life from moment to moment, non-stop, as long as there are conditions. Who can stop the next moment to arise? No matter in this world or after this world. Who knows whether now Roti is among us listening, smiling, as he used to be. Who knows? But there must be whatever arises to be taken of this person or that person or things. But in truth, everything gone after it has arisen. No one can stop it. No one can have it at all because it's gone. The truth, just to understand the truth of life, nothing is permanent. Nothing can be controlled. No one can make anything arise. In truth, actually, how can there be anyone when there is only seeing arising and falling away, and thinking arising and falling away, hearing arising and falling away? Where's the one, the person? It's gone instantly. Just find out the truth, whether what is true and what is not true. So what is not true? Or is everything is true now? Is everything true now as something or someone or some place or some idea? Anything gone. But no understanding of each different one as it is, as not the same reality, same kind at all. For example, hearing cannot see at all. Seeing has to just see. And hearing cannot see at all. Hearing just can hear. Only that and then gone. Where were they now from moment to moment? It's the word of thinking and the seeing and hearing. Each moment is gone, not permanent at all. So after birth, nothing is permanent, arising and falling away, because even the first moment of birth is gone. Everything, what is not gone after it has arisen. Can that be known or realized the moment when seeing is not hearing, is not thinking? Where am I? And what can be I? Impossible. Seeing is seeing. And seeing right now, it's not just seeing a moment ago. And we can stop hearing to arise, seeing to arise. From what we take for this life, next life, or other lives. Only different realities conditioned to arise and then go on. Just, is this not true? When it's true, one has to be truthful to the truth. Seeing cannot be I. It cannot be taken for I because it's gone instantly. Thinking cannot be I or anyone at all. It's conditioned to arise in such manner such moment and then gone. Never comes. Before
And I-
anyone think about changing it, it's completely gone. Is that true?
And I think, Milena, this answers your question about practice or being aware, because as Ajahn just said, seeing has arisen already. No one can stop it from rising. No one can stop it from falling away. Or heat. You didn't ask to experience heat, but heat was conditioned to arise and the experiencing of it was conditioned. So no one can practice to have heat or be aware of heat, because what we learn is each of these realities are conditioned to arise and conditioned to fall away instantly. So no one is there to practice or do anything at all. No one that can be aware. But awareness itself is a reality that can arise by conditions. So whatever we're talking about, it's about different realities that are conditioned, not anything which is under anyone's control at all.
So this is why there's no reason to particularly try.
It's the point, because as soon as there's the idea of I am trying, or I am trying to be aware, or I can practice, behind that idea, there is the idea that there is a self that has some control over life, some control over what arises. But the seeing now, or the hearing now, it arises by its conditions. It doesn't arise because I can control it to arise, or I can make it last longer. It just arises when there are conditions, like Nina mentioned. The sound has to be there, the ear sense has to be there. There have to be conditions for hearing to arise, and it falls away instantly. So what is the use of this imaginary I trying to do anything? So we live in the fantasy that there is an I that can control life, that can decide what will be done. But at this moment, hearing arises by conditions, the sound arises by conditions, the heat is conditioned to be experienced and then gone. Next moment, no heat experienced, no I that can do anything at all.
So in other words, you might say that this I seeing, I doing this, I doing that is a misunderstanding. So if there's any I associated with the idea of practice, then we're saying that it's a misunderstanding that should lead to understanding, and that's impossible. It's actually the opposite. Misunderstanding, wrong understanding cannot lead to right understanding.
Because you would have to get rid of the I, no?
It's not about getting rid of anything. It's because understanding needs to be developed little by little to become firm that in fact there are only realities, no I anywhere. And once the understanding is deep enough to condition that level of understanding, then we're talking about at the level of enlightenment, the first stage of enlightenment. Then at that point is the wrong understanding completely eradicated. Before that, no.
No, it's not possible to get rid of any misunderstanding, except that as understanding is gradually developed, then misunderstanding is gradually reduced. So, but it has to happen organically, naturally, rather than, it can't happen by wanting to have more understanding and less misunderstanding for obvious reasons. But the reason we talk about seeing visible object, hearing and sound, and bodily experiences like heat and hardness, because the understanding we have, to whatever extent it's good or correct or incorrect, applies to everything, not just to the things that we might think are important, like our mental states, but to everything, every moment of life, including this one, and the different experiences that are going on. So it's all the understanding of what is absolute, is true and correct, applies to any reality that comprises the present moment.
So hearing and considering more about what life is at this moment, different from how we've always thought it is, like we've always thought, I can experience my hot leg, but we're beginning to learn it's just heat that's experienced now, and it's just a moment of bodily experience, not I that experiences anything. By beginning to hear and consider about the different realities that make up life now, this considering is a condition for understanding and awareness to develop little by little, like adding grains of salt into a bucket of water. Little by little, it becomes more salty. Little by little, the understanding accumulates. And when thinking about Roti's understanding, the understanding is not lost. It accumulates from life to life, conditioning more understanding in future. The understanding is now it's not out of the blue, but because there had been the considering and understanding before, even before this life, many lifetimes, in order for what is heard to make sense and for to be the considering and understanding a little more, a little more. So there are conditions for your understanding to appreciate what is said and to listen more and consider more. And this is how understanding grows, not by I or you or anyone doing anything, but the understanding itself conditions more understanding. Just like if there is anger, it conditions more anger, or when there is attachment, it conditions more attachment. But the kindness conditions more kindness. The understanding conditions more understanding. It accumulates. And this is why we always come back to talking about what life is at this very moment. We think now that what is seen are different people, different friends, different backdrops, but we learn that actually it's just what is visible that is seen, and following what is seen, there is the thinking about people and backdrops and different colors, but actually what is seen at this moment is just the visible object, and it's gone instantly. No one chose what to see at this moment. So what is seen, the visible object, arises by conditions and falls away immediately. No one chooses what to think about what is seen, but the thinking that has been accumulated thinks about different people, different objects, different colors by its own conditions. So whatever arises in life now is conditioned. No one that controls, no one that does anything at all. But without hearing about the different kinds of realities, it's impossible to understand that there is no self, nothing there at all.
Yes, this is the part that's very difficult, but if I feel like if you focus on, it seems like if you just experience the seeing and the hearing, there is no self somehow, because you're in the middle, you're going moment for moment. Like, how could you have a self, I understand that probably we are conditioned to reflect our own personal or like we're filtering what we're filtering things through what we conceive of as self, but it's actually just, it seems like an imagination compared to what is actually truth, which is only what's happening in that moment. Is that somewhat there? I mean,
yes, it's an assumed entity, isn't it? The self is an assumed thing because the self is not itself experienced in the same way that, for example, heat can be experienced. When heat is experienced through the body, it's there, it's real, it can't be denied. When there's liking, for example, we taste something we like, there's liking, it's a reality, it's real at that moment. It's the same for everyone. All the emotions we talk about, anger, irritation, consideration, kindness, expectation, and so forth. These are all things that are real when they happen and they have a characteristic by which they can be known. So we know that what is heard, for example, sound, is different from what is seen. These can be distinguished because one is experienced through the eyes and the other is experienced through the ears, and they can't be mistaken one for the other, or one can't perform the function of the other. But the so-called self cannot be experienced or known in the same way. It's just an idea, an assumption, and there can be a sense of its reality, but there again, that's all it is. And so by having a better understanding of what can be directly known, one gradually comes to a better appreciation that life is just the different conditioned realities that can be experienced. But it takes a long time, and it's not suggested we need to believe in this or that, self or no self or whatever, because there's no point in believing something that hasn't been verified or can't be verified. But we just consider the Buddha's explanation of the reality of the present moment as we continue to live our lives, and see to what extent it is consistent with our experience in life.
So
And Milena,
Oh,
yeah, okay,
yeah.
you go ahead. Sure. Okay, I'll say, Milena, although you were talking just now about knowing the reality that it's only there, what you're referring to is the level we call understanding, which is a very high level of understanding. But before that, you can always reflect on, like right now, there's so many things going on. What John just said, what you just heard, is all fallen away, and it just happens like that. Even now, the sound is falling away, seeing is falling away, new experiences replaced by new experiences all the time. So at that level too, there can be some understanding about what it means that there is no self and there are only realities, each conditioned to rise and fall away, and no one to control.
Interesting. It's sort of it reminds me a little bit of negative space. I don't know, as if I get an image in my head of just the silhouette of a negative space, and then that negative space is constructed by all these things around it, So it's not like you're drawing the line of the silhouette, but the silhouette's being created by the conditions around it, let's say. This was how, as a child, I was taught to draw. So it would be, you wouldn't draw what you thought was in front of you. You would draw everything that would make that thing appear in front of you. There was something about that that sort of clicked with what you were saying about the conditions, that being some sort of visual way to explain conditions.
Very difficult to understand. For all of us, it took a lot of hearing and considering to get a grasp of it. So we don't expect to get a good grasp of it from the outset. It's a bit like even when one does get a grasp of things. We were talking earlier about how we tendencies are accumulated. We like this and we don't like that. We get irritated by something, or we get enjoyment out of doing something else. And these tendencies are that way because they've been accumulated in the past. And things don't change just because we start to have a better understanding of the reality of the present moment. And that's why it's not possible to think in terms of, we tried to explain earlier, getting rid of the wrong view and adopting the right view. It has to happen naturally by conditions, by having heard how things are and considered it. So it just takes time, and you're doing very well.
So back to seeing and hearing now. So the seeing at this moment, which sees what is visible, but is there anyone that experiences the seeing, or is it the seeing itself which arises and experiences what is visible now? Can I see what is visible? Or is it seeing which sees what is visible now?
I would say it would be seeing that's making it seeing, because if you were to close your eyes, it wouldn't be visible now.
So as soon as there's opening the eyes, seeing arises because the eye sense and the visible object condition it to arise at that moment. So the seeing arises and experiences what is visible and is gone. So it's not I that experiences the seeing, or it's not I that sees. It's the seeing consciousness itself, which arises for a moment and sees what is visible. No one can make the seeing happen. No one can stop it from arising. It arises by its conditions and it's gone. And exactly the same with hearing. It's not I that experience the hearing. The hearing arises by conditions, hears the sound, and then falls away. Afterwards, there is thinking, which arises by conditions and thinks about the sounds heard, thinks about the meanings, thinks about the different kinds of sounds, thinks about the story of what is heard now. But what is heard at this moment is just sound, and it's hearing which hears the sound. a different kind of reality. So sound is the kind of reality that doesn't experience anything, and hearing is the kind of reality that experiences the object. So this is life at this moment, just hearing which hears sound and then gone, thinking which thinks about the meaning. So the hearing is real, the sound is real, the thinking is real, but the idea that is thought about is just an idea, like thinking about the leg that is warm. The thinking is real, but the leg that is warm are just different ideas that are thought about. So when we talk about what is life now, we're talking about moments of hearing, of sound, moments of seeing of what is visible, moments of thinking about different ideas. And this is the way that gradually there's a little more understanding that there is no I that can experience, no I that can do anything, no I that can follow a practice, no I that can make understanding arise. Just different dharmas arising by conditions and falling away. And this is the understanding that led to letting go of the big burden for Roti and other friends, the big burden of the idea that one has to practice, one has to go into a quiet place, one has to sit in a particular way, one has to follow different activities. It's a great burden in life. So we really rejoice that there can be the understanding taught by the Buddha to let go this burden of self.
This is what it's sort of interesting, because there was a way of experiencing life in this way where I think it was maybe the lack of attachment, like this, or not projecting an expectation, where it was just completely, all that was understood as a burden. And it seemed like a big relief, It's
a big, big relief, because it was such a big change from following a wrong practice, a wrong path, and beginning to understand the truth that there is no I to control or do anything, so that one can live one's life naturally and easily, like go for swims in the ocean and do his yoga and have fun with friends, whilst developing understanding very naturally and easily in daily life. No need to sit in a special posture, no need to live in a particular place. One can live in a nice home and live life easily, letting go that burden of self little by little.
So one question is that I do have just in general. For many years I had talked about or listened to Rodrigo tell me about things. And, I was always sort of feeling like I had learned something, or something had happened, or something was awoken, and it was always misguided in a way, because I would say things that would be like, oh, so if I don't have to hang on to my past, then I can forget about the burden of my parents or my childhood things, or things like this, right? And it would be, and Rodri would immediately say, no, it's not, there is no self. So you don't, like, let's go back to the seeing and hearing and thinking. So when you mentioned to me that there's grains of salt going in the water and it's little by little, I'm thinking about the repetition of those things, and how for so many years, I just heard him basically saying the same thing over and over. there were things that would change. There was, but basically there was like this one fragment of information, and it's, as you said, very subtle, but I'm wondering, is it because this is the information?
It's the information that we begin to consider intellectually, like we have to begin to consider, maybe it's possible it is just hearing that hears now, not I that hears. So it is information, but there can be the considering whether it's true. Is there a self anywhere to be found that hears, or is it just hearing now? So the considering and reflecting has to develop and consider, so that there is more and more confidence in what is true now, because the teachings are to be proven. It doesn't matter whether we call them the Buddha's teachings or anyone's teachings, but it is the truth at this moment to be understood a little more, until it's understood directly with confidence that develops firmer and firmer. So this is why we come back to this moment, what is true now, because I can tell you that it's heat that is experienced through the body sense, but if there's no experience of it, then it's just an idea. But now there is heat experience, because you told me yourself, there is hardness experience, there is sound heard, and it's not something there that is experienced. So there can be a little more understanding, so that the confidence is firmer. When we think about situations, like it seems I can make a decision to go to San Francisco tomorrow, or eat this or do that. But when it comes to this moment of seeing or hearing, it becomes a little firmer, a little more apparent that no one can make hearing arise now if there are no conditions, and no one can stop it from arising when there are conditions. So this is why we come back to understand what the reality is at this moment, because this is the only way that there can be the letting go of the idea of I or something here. And this is life just at this very moment.
Yes, I think that's very important to keep in mind, because the idea or the teaching or the conclusion that there is no self, it's not something that can be appreciated or realized at the present moment. That is the conclusion, the ultimate realization that follows from understanding what can be understood about the present moment. And it's when the present moment realities are fully understood that the appreciation that there's no self there comes to be realized. So although we hear that there is, we understand that's the consequence of the Buddha's teaching. When he taught to his listeners, when he delivered his sermons that we have recorded, he explained to them, his listeners, what is the reality of the present moment, what is to be understood. And so that's the starting point. We cannot start from a position of there's no self, because that's not something that can be verified. So we come back always to what is real about the present moment, what can be known, what can be directly experienced. And from that, move forward from there. So I see you wrestling a bit with the no self concept, and I think one doesn't need to try and penetrate that at this stage, because it's just our self who is trying to see that anyway. But the other aspects of the Buddha's teaching, the things that he described as being true in the present moment, are capable of our consideration and, to some extent, to a limited extent, of course, verification, because the truth and reality of the present moment cannot suddenly be seen just because one has heard things explained in a different way.
Alan, would you like to add a comment for Milena, because you also have a background in physics and science and you appreciate where she's coming?
Yeah, I think that she's right, that she can call it physics, because the word physics means knowledge of nature, but it's not the science physics, but it is knowledge of nature. So yes, it is physics basically, but nothing to do with science. And in order to understand what the Buddha taught you, you have to leave the words of science behind completely, because they're not, they're only concerned with ideas, not with realities. So the object of understanding in science is always an idea. So for example, you mentioned heat. In science, that's the average kinetic energy of the molecules, but that's thinking about heat, not the development of understanding of the reality of heat when it arises. So these two have different domains. Science has a different domain to the teachings of the Buddha, and you have to leave science behind, at least temporarily. Doesn't mean you stop thinking of science, but it just does mean that in order to develop an understanding of reality, you just have to leave those words behind. You have to listen to what the Buddha taught to develop that understanding. But I think it is right. It is a type of physics.
So,
Did you agree?
So physics as in knowledge of nature.
Yes, because we're talking about the present moment, and we're learning to understand what the present moment is. Well, that's knowledge of nature, because the present moment is real, and we're learning to understand more precisely what it is. So sometimes it will be tasting, sometimes it will be smelling, sometimes it will be hardness or softness or heat, but it is real, and we are learning about that reality. It's not, so Buddhism isn't his opinion, it is about reality as it is. So we're learning about, sorry?
As it can be directly experienced rather than learnt about.
Yes, exactly. So we're learning about reality by direct experience when it arises. So heat can be understood when it arises, or when there's a smell, that can be understood when it arises, or if it's like or dislike, when they arise, they can be understood. It's not just the thinking about these realities, but in the beginning, we have to think intellectually about these realities in order to directly experiencing them. So the beginning is thinking about realities. But yeah, I would think that it is a type of physics. Would you agree with that, Jonathan?
I don't feel the need to categorize it by reference to physics or chemistry or anything else. I mean, it's its own, because it's so unique, but I don't mind if you find it helpful to think of it in terms of.
Yes, I don't think we do. We don't need to categorize it as physics, but it is important to understand, I think, that it's not a belief. It is about what the world is at this moment. So we're not talking about believing in the teachings of the Buddha, but we are talking about the development of understanding what this moment is, and that is nature. So as a physicist, as a background of physicist, like I said, I think it's just a different branch of physics, but a little bit more useful. Well, not a little bit more, but a lot more useful.
It's the universal truth of the present moment. So
yes,
what is true for one person is true for another also. The truths we are talking about of what is
Yes.
real.
And I remember a long
are the
time
same.
ago, a long time ago, Jan said you forget this idea of truth for different people, but just think about whether those words represent the truth of reality at this moment. So forget this person or that person. Heat can be experienced at this moment. So when it's experienced, it is true at that moment. And we don't need to bring in this idea of, is it true for this person or that person? Those words reflect the truth of this moment. And then when we talked about authority last time, I think with you, Jonathan, the ultimate authority is that the words represent the truth of this moment.
Because regardless of the state of knowledge of the time, the truth of hardness or heat or cold at the present moment is the same from
Yes.
one age to the next.
Yes, and it's it takes a long time, I think, to understand this notion of no self or be or person, because actually, when you're talking about heat, heat is just heat or hardness is just hardness. That's really a very difficult concept to understand, because we very firmly believe that we have hands and feet and they last for some time. So suddenly being brought along to this idea of, oh, actually it's hardness which is experienced, no hand or foot. That's a really, I think, a very challenging idea to be introduced to. It's not easy to begin to understand that what is touched is just hardness.
But there were people, Alan, during the Buddha's time who, moment after they heard that, they became enlightened. That's because the reality is like that. At any given moment, there's always a reality to be known. So it depends on the understanding. Well, when the understanding is little like ours, and we have so much ideas, from other sources like science and etc., then we always refer back to our old ways of thinking and start comparing, and that's where we forget that there's a reality now, which is what the Buddha taught to be known, and that's why I
Yes.
think you can't compare physics with the Dhamma, because the Dhamma is always about now.
Yes, yeah, different people, different levels of understanding, for sure. Yeah, some people very easy, some people never interested at all. So it's yeah, I agree. Yeah.
And the idea of hand or foot, of course, also the enlightened being also thinks in terms of hand and feet. But there's no underlying misapprehension as to what is real in the ultimate sense at the present moment. But the thoughts are still there. The concepts are still
Yes, you still think about heat, but there's the clear understanding that touching is different from thinking. Whereas most of the time it's all combined together. You touch an object, but actually there are different realities there which are not understood separately. So we touch hardness and then think about that hardness as my hand or the table, and no understanding of that distinction.
And when you talk about putting the scientific ideas aside and looking at the Dhamma fresh, it's the same with any other subject too. Like my background was in psychology, but it's the same. One has to put aside one's ideas of psychology or science, because the Dhamma is completely different subject. It's about the understanding of what is true and real now. And then one can work in one's area, but not try to conflate or try to make them the same. And I think there are other people here who also have a background in science, like Anli and Chanti. And so it's the same for everyone. There has to be the beginning to appreciate what is true and real at this moment, not try to fit it into one's background of study.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And I've had people question me about that sound is real. They say, and they come up with some complicated explanation of quantum mechanics, and it's quite that they cannot accept that sound can be heard, and it's really quite sort of odd. So yeah, it's not easy, and science. A lot of people try and compare it to science. They try and figure it out from a scientific background, but the problem, like comparing where in Buddhism is quantum mechanics, but the trouble is they never progress. You have to leave it behind to listen and understand what the Buddha taught, as you say, because it's completely different, and unless you do that, you just never learn, you never get anywhere.
It becomes a real hindrance to listening to the truth, because one keeps thinking of the concept of quantum mechanics or psychological perception or something like this, instead of just beginning to appreciate what is true or what is real or what can be understood now. It doesn't matter whether one calls what is heard sound or anything else, but there is the reality that is heard at this moment, different from what is thought about.
Yes, and I think that people, as you were saying a couple of weeks ago, that people are have beliefs about science, very attached to science, and that prevents them from even considering anything else, especially a religion. So we've got this deep notion that science is the way to understand the world, and that actually just stops people from considering anything else. So it's a hindrance, but then all attachment is a hindrance.
Yeah, but you can see from the example you just gave, Alan, when you talk to someone about hearing, and he wasn't getting it, he didn't believe it, and he was going back to his whatever his knowledge was. What was at that time? There was ignorance, right? I mean, there is hearing right now. It's true, and
Yes.
yet, you insist on it being something else. It's there to be known, but there's really no intention to understand it.
Yeah, it's not science that's the block, it's the attachment to whatever. It's the attachment to science which is a block. So you can still be a scientist and be a Buddhist, but the attachment to science can block the understanding of reality, as will any attachment blocks it in a way, pushes you off to something else, thinking about something else all the time. So that needs to be sort of seen as it is, really, and no choice. It's conditioned moment. So you don't have a choice as to whether you're going to be thinking of the Dharma or of science. But as you develop more understanding of reality, it will be recognized as a conditioned moment which pushes you onto something else.
I just want to speak to another possibly new member. Nisa, are you, is this your first time joining us? I don't know if I pronounce your name correctly. Nisa?
Yes, I'm sorry. Yeah, Nisa is okay.
And where are you from, Nisa?
Originally, I'm from Thailand. And, as I grew up in Thailand until I was 23, I went to stay in Los Angeles to continue my education for the past 42 years. And then there's something happened to me that I have to come back home. So now I'm in Chonburi, Thailand. Yes.
Okay. Anyway, glad that you can join us. Is there any topic or anything you would like to bring up or ask Ajahn or anyone?
I just think that when we experience something that is definitely anicca, dukkha, anatta, But the part where the Shavana in the Vitti-citta comes in is when we can react, and that's it, to accumulate and, you know, create conditions that we want. So we only have a chance to react to whatever we experience. And that's, to me, in my understanding, is what is the heart of the teachings. So that's what I'm just concentrate on.
What do you mean having a chance to react? Because it could be said, couldn't it? We just react automatically.
That's too, but if you practice Satipatthana, I would hope that that's why the Buddha teaches Satipatthana. So we can use the Chavana to accumulate. Maybe the first time we did not catch it, how we react to the Upanisai Pachaya that we accumulate for millions and millions and millions of lifetimes. But right now, I would rather think that I have a choice. That's also from my accumulation of millions of lifetimes too, that I would, you know, when I experienced the same thing yesterday, I developed patika against it. But today, I experienced the similar thing, but I rather have my Shavana do not have patika arise as much. Maybe it will arise anyway, but not as much.
For others, she's talking about aversion arising.
And she's also talking about wholesome and unwholesome mental states, which arise in a process. So when there are moments of experiencing, say, what is seen or what is heard, there is a lot of, there are many mind-or moments of thinking about or processing the data that's experienced by seeing or hearing consciousness. And this thinking or processing is the function of wholesome or unwholesome mental states. What do you understand? You talked about practicing Satipatthana. What do you understand by that, Lisa?
When you look at what we call existent, it's only nama and rupa, the physical and psychological, let's say, factors that arise and was experienced by the, let's call consciousness at any moment. But the next moment after the Votaparam arise, we going into create our own karma. Yes, it's based on what we accumulate before and we have no choice. But I would rather think that that's the karma was meant to be in action. The previous thing that we experienced, it's passive. So Satipatthana comes in when we, you know, it's not like immediate process, I'm sure. You just have to develop it. That's why they call it bhavana. And, you know, little by little, you can use the Satipatthana, the 4 chapters. I mean, it's I'm trying to think. Kaya, Vedana.
Okay, I think we get. I'd like to just think paraphrase what I think you're saying, correct me if I'm wrong, but you think that we can, by deliberate effort, have more awareness and understanding, and thereby develop understanding in that way.
Yes.
Gradually. But I think the question is this, is that the Buddha's teaching? Did the Buddha teach that awareness and understanding can be the conditions for the arising of those mental states? I'm sorry, just
I think let's pass it to Ajahn's point.
I would like to understand the meaning of the word Dhamma, because we have heard this word all the time. Please, can anyone help me to understand more about this word, Dhamma? What is it? Because I have heard also all reality is whatever is real is Dhamma. So what is it? Is it there now? Do we have to do this and that, change this and use that, or just it's there? And what about the explanation of its truth as it is? Otherwise, we just talk about any word or anything, like the word physics. At that moment, what is there? At that very moment, hearing, physics, what is there? Is there anything, or is there something, or what is the truth of it at that very moment that can be known? Otherwise, I think that we just talk about the word, about whatever we think. Like Chavana, what is it? Is it that now? Can it be known? If it's seeing, the moment of seeing, what is that? Is it Chavana or not? And so on. Just one word at a time to really understand that it's there, so true that it can be known directly too, about the truth of it. Otherwise, the matter we learn about this term or that word, what about the truth? Is it that it can be known, can be directly known, directly experienced, to know that it's as true as it has taught? So it's hearing Dhamma and it's physics Dhamma. So is it Satipatthana Dhamma? Has anyone experienced Dhamma? Can it be experienced, Dhamma? Is it there now, Dhamma? It doesn't mean that everyone knows about it clearly, perfectly, or just heard about it. Even it's there, just heard about it. So what is Dhamma now? Or is there Dhamma now? It's real, not real. Does it appear? Or doesn't it appear?
Nisa, perhaps you could try to answer Ajan's questions, which will be helpful for everyone. So what is Dhamma now?
I don't know if it will be helpful to anyone, but to me, Dhamma means just right now what I'm just talking or thinking what to say, anticipate what I will experience or I'm experiencing. That is Dhamma to me. But yeah, I understand that partly when translated into English, it's just not adequate or not even close or have any word in English to explain. Maybe you need, 50 pages to explain just the word Dhamma and still not cover it or not even close. I just have no idea. Sorry.
So Dhamma is the reality, like we were talking about earlier with Milena. So at this moment of hearing is Dhamma. It's a Dhamma that experiences. And the sound that is heard now is another Dhamma. It's a reality that is heard. But I have choice or my leg is warm. These are ideas, concepts. They're not Dhammas. So what is Dhamma now means what is real that can be understood at this very moment. For example, seeing now, is seeing a Dhamma?
Everyone knows the answer or doubt. Is it there? When it's there, what is it that is there? Oh, don't know. No idea. Or some idea about that. To be known whether it's true or not. Is it very simple? Everyone knows. Oh, it's so very subtle. That is known by words only. Not about its nature. Does it appear as it is? If not, what's the truth of it? And who knows how many things are there in that very moment, just in a moment. What are there? It appears sometimes in the life only something that we used to think about it like, dislike, anger, hardness, and so on. But what are there? And then gone, never last. Birth and death, no more. Remembrance about what are there now, and that it has to be ended up. And what about next life, after death, just now and next moment? Is there any difference? in truth. And why there is the idea of birth and death, if they're the same, or not exactly the same, or the same kind, same ability, different moment, different conditions, different function. Can a tree see anything? Why not? What can one do? Can physics help? Can I say, these are Dhamma? Otherwise, what's the meaning of Dhamma? Even the question, can anyone live without Dhamma? Is it not interesting to know the truth of what is there just right then? Sound, how come? Is it hearing, or it is that which is heard by hearing? And what is the hearing? Seems very simple, but very deep. And why so subtle, so very deep? Because no one knows the truth of that very moment. It's gone. And what's the answer of all these questions? And what is the right answer? Is it worthless to consider the truth of it? It's there so real, and then it's gone. Who knows the moment it arises and falls away? It's only the idea of thinking that it's not always there. See, it's each moment, different sound. Is the other reality is just like this, just from nothing, then something, and then nothing again. What is there in a moment? In a moment, who knows?
And Nisa, you said that you prefer to think you have choice at this very moment. Do you have a choice as to whether seeing arises or hearing arises or thinking arises at this very moment?
Well, I would rather think that nanosecond ago, I choose not to turn on the TV. That is what I choose. So experience bad news on the TV, which going to create aversion in me, did not happen. To me, that's what I choose. Or to use the word is that you kind of practice sense restraint. So second ago, you practice sense restraint. 1 second later, you don't have to have aversion. Does that make sense to you?
This is like I talked to Milena about before. When we think about different stories or conventional situations, like turning on the television or not, going to this restaurant or that restaurant, it seems I have a choice. But when we talk about the reality at this very moment, seeing now, which has arisen already by conditions, no one can stop it from arising when there are conditions. After seeing, attachment arises instantly to what is seen. By the time there's any idea of having sense constraint, that attachment has long since gone. Numerous moments of attachment have arisen and gone. So the idea that I can stop it, or I can control it, or I have choice, it's just moments of thinking. So the thinking is conditioned. I have a choice, or I can have sense constraint, or I won't have anger. But who knows at the next moment whether attachment or anger will arise, because it's conditioned to arise at that moment. Like now, maybe there's a moment of understanding, or maybe there's a moment of attachment, or maybe there's a moment of boredom. No one is choosing to have boredom or choosing to have attachment. But if there are conditions for boredom or attachment, it arises and is gone instantly. So the idea of I is the fantasy that there is an I to be found that can do something. It's not the understanding of the reality that is conditioned already at this moment, as taught by the Buddha.
But where are these conditions that comes to this moment came from? It came from what conditions that I did, maybe 1 hour ago, maybe one lifetime ago, or maybe just nanosecond ago. So I don't, for me, that is still, I will say that I will have, I wouldn't say my choice, but I would say that not I who do this, but because of the condition that this nama rupa continuum has done before, this continuation of this nama and rupa did different thing to get to different result.
So this is why we have to talk about one reality at a time, like seeing. The conditions for seeing are completely different from the conditions for anger, because the seeing is a result of karma, and it's conditioned by the arising of the visible object and the eye sense, which have already arisen, and karma in the past that produces that moment of result, the moment of seeing or hearing. But the anger or the boredom or the understanding that arises now arises because of the accumulated tendency. Like we said earlier, a little understanding now, like a grain of salt in the water, it accumulates. Each moment of understanding conditions a little more understanding in future, just like a moment of anger now conditions anger to arise again and again. So each reality arises by different conditions, but none of those conditions are the imaginary I that has a choice, that can do anything or decide anything. because it's the fantasy. There is no I that is a condition, just the thinking that there is an I, and that thinking about the I is a condition because the thinking is real. It's Dhamma. The seeing is Dhamma. What is seen is Dhamma. The thinking is Dhamma. But I is just a fantasy, nowhere to be found. That's why we have to talk about one reality at a time and understand a little bit more about the conditions. Like you mentioned, we can use the Javana, but what is this we that can use anything, that can do anything? Because the attachment cannot be used. It arises by conditions and falls away. We cannot use it. And the same with understanding, no we to use it. Otherwise, we would make it arise at every moment, but no we that can do anything at all. If there are no conditions for understanding now, it won't arise.
So Kunisa, I think you were referring to Upanisaya Pachaya, which means that realities that arise by natural decisive support condition. And we were referring to understanding now can condition understanding later. So what you are saying is that when you say there's a choice, you're saying that if there are conditions, more accumulated kusala and other wisdom and other kusala, then there's a good chance of them arising later. The chance of them arising later increases as against a kusala. So you would agree that, and we all agree that that's how it is. The more a certain kind of habits are accumulated, the chance of it arising also increases as time passes and depend on other conditions. So we agree, but then I think you also should understand by now that it's all just dhammas that we are talking about, no self who can make anything arise.
No. What does, well, what we call me right now is saying is I'm just nothing but a nama rupa interaction, interwoven, and go on like that. I'm sorry, I shouldn't use the word I. But you know, just for conventional conversation, I choose. Here I go again. But yes, what I mean is just the nama rupa, that interaction for what accumulated throughout millenniums, and that's what I understand.
See, it's not a question of what we use to describe the present moment. You can even use to say that we are all just but only nama and rupa with the idea of self, or you can use I without misunderstanding that there is a self. It depends on the understanding. So that's why Sarah likes to bring back all of us back to what appears now, because that's where the understanding can happen, is to understand what appears at the moment, what's the reality at this moment. And it's not just a matter of thinking that there's no we, and we are in the end just namas and rupas. Do you agree with that?
Yes, I do.
And on the question of sense restraint, which you also mentioned, sense restraint in the Buddha's teaching, of course, we're talking now, is a moment of wholesome consciousness, which restrains from unwholesomeness. But that's not the same as you or I deciding not to turn on the TV. We need to come back to the present moment. If there is awareness, if there is wholesome moment of consciousness, then there is restraint at that moment, but only if. Sense restraint is not something that can be done. So we tend to think in terms of practicing, but the question is whether when there's that kind of action or practicing or deliberate action on our part, whether that's wholesome or unwholesome consciousness.
And you know what I think, Nisa, is that in spite of the misunderstanding that sometimes arises and the idea of control and thinking that we can make things arise, in truth, you do, I mean, from experience, come to the conclusion that there is no control. Otherwise, why would you not think and try to have sati and panya all the time? You know, those such thoughts don't come because you know from experience that that's not possible. Wouldn't that be the ideal, to make a sati and panya arise now? But it's not possible.
And Carmen, I think this topic also relates to your questions about determinism and free will and the understanding of what is conditioned now, as opposed to thinking about the situations. This is why Ajahn was asking, what is Dhamma now? Because it's by understanding what is Dhamma now, what is the reality at this moment, what appears now. This is the way that gradually there's understanding that there is no I or will to be free, and what we're talking about is not what is determined, but what is conditioned at this very moment. So seeing now arises by conditions, but no one is there to make it arise. No free will, no fixed order, just different dhammas arising and falling away by conditions. We may have to continue next week, I think, because these are good topics that both Nisa has brought up, and I would like to bring up I'd like you to bring up your topic a little bit further, so maybe we can continue next week.
Yes, thank you.
Please come next week and we continue on further, because Carmen has several points that are a little bit related. Yes. Ajahn, any last words, or else we will continue next time?
Just to have more understanding about Dhamma. Swadika.
Thank you.
Swadika,
And-
Ajahn. Thank you.
Thank you, Chan.
Thank you so much, Sarah, also for inviting me to come and join.
I'm so glad that you could join, Milena, and thank you for also sharing more background. And this would be a great legacy for Roti if you and one or two of his other friends are able to join and continue discussing Dhamma. So I hope to see you next time. I know it must be the middle of the night for you, so very glad you could join.
Yeah, thanks very much, Milena, for giving us all that information. We were wondering